Calling the meeting into session at 6 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. I'll begin by reading our ethics statement. Board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board present know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of this meeting you become aware of actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Agenda look okay. We will be perhaps a little out of order in case we have an agenda item that requires quorum, but we will go ahead and review the agenda. And in the meantime, we'll ask if there's any public comments. I have none. I have signed up. Okay. Greetings, fellow board members. Good to see everyone. Thank you. Just in time for the approval of the September board minutes.
I'll have to make a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. The Athletic Booster Club report.
I believe they are actively engaged in getting ready for Booster Bash this Friday, and therefore they'll be not here tonight. But things are going well. Our new partnership where we're helping to support some of the administrative responsibilities is working really well. We're working out a few kinks here and there, but other than that, all parties seem to really be liking the new system. And we look forward to supporting the Booster Bash this Friday as they bring all of our community together to celebrate this time of year.
Thank you. We're happy to have, I believe, our new Student Government Association president join us at the table. So if you'd like to give your report, welcome to your first meeting.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Page, and I was just recently elected to the student body. As of right now, we're just looking to continue helping with victims of Hurricane Florence. We're in the midst of planning a project, but we don't have an official report for you guys right now.
Well, thank you. Welcome. Great job. Now we'll have our director's report.
So we're going to start with our good news and news report. So if I can direct your attention to the TV monitor either behind or to your left, and we'll be ready to go.
And we just finished reading the book, Freak the Mighty. In the book, Max and Kim become best friends and they face many challenges and adventures together. The adventures and they take them through the medieval period of time. After reading the book, we
Pause and let it think for a second.
gargoyle, stained glass, and illuminated manuscripts. In addition to all of that, we had a medieval merriment party and we launched marshmallows off of catapults. We learned that throughout this book that friendship can be held throughout forever and ever, even when something dangerous happens. I learned that love can be spread forever.
Good morning, I'm Ms. McGinnis, one of the school counselors here. I'm excited to talk about some of the activities that we're going to be doing during the month of October. We are going to be celebrating our Anti-Bully Month, and we're also going to be doing Red Ribbon Week, which is our drug prevention campaign. So we will be letting the students participate in different activities and themes each day, and we would love to have you be a part of that.
Fractions. Heat transfer through the atmosphere.
Mixtures, solutions, elements, and compounds.
We're studying the role of the enlightenment on
resources of the American Revolution.
So in fourth grade, we are currently studying natural resources of North Carolina.
Solving exponentials.
We're covering algebraic inequalities and their application in solving.
In fourth grade math, we are learning adding and subtracting with multi-digits.
Systems of equations.
In fourth grade ELA, we are learning how to write narratives.
We're looking at relations and functions and their applications and their graphs and their function rules.
In fifth grade, we're reading Blow on the River and focusing on theme right now.
In honors biology, we are in the middle of genetics, so we're talking about sex traits and blood typing and how your mom looks like you and all that stuff.
Line plots and graphs.
And in forensics, we're just finishing up ballistics and tool marksmanship.
Age of exploration. Hi, my name is Natalie Ward, and I teach 7th grade English here at New Charter. We have just finished reading The Outsiders, and the students have definitely learned that some get an unfair advantage in life. Going forward, the students will be divided into greasers and socias, and they will compete with each other in 5 different relay challenges, where the socias will have a slightly unfair advantage over the greasers.
Hey, this is Chris Gallagher. I'm science, 5th grade. So excited. We're going to be learning about matter. We like matter because matter matters.
Hope you've enjoyed our first edition of Good News and News. And a special thank you to Dr. Swartzlander for being our pilot, innovator, engineer, imagineer for this project to get us going, hence the heavy focus on the Intermediate Academy. But we're going to look forward to more of these each month so that you can have a better understanding of some of the things that are happening all across campus with our students and our classes.
Miss Fuller, what do you call that?
Good News at News.
That's really nice.
And we're also going to link it to our YouTube channel on our outside facing pages, link it to our website, link it to our Facebook pages and all that. And this will become one of those monthly updates that everyone can look forward to. Fun. Nice job. We already have some students in our 5th grade technology classes that are learning how to use green screens, and they recently taught our high school level or senior academy level dramatic arts class how to use those green screens. So we're going to really look to have our students get more engaged in building some of these for us in the future. That way they'll be even more excited. So again, thank you. As far as my general report, again, our ADM is set at 942. Our current enrollment is 934. We are basically at capacity in grades kindergarten through 9. It's 10, 11, and 12 where we tend to have a few openings, which we always do, but we still are maintaining a wait list of 166 students. So if we do find that we have openings in those lower grades, kindergarten through 9th grade, we will be able to backfill those seats. As far as staff vacancies go, we do currently have a Title I Success Coach vacancy. The person that we hired at the beginning of the year to be our Success Coach helped us transition into 2nd grade when one of our 2nd grade teachers decided to take on a new adventure. And so that position is open and we are actively interviewing. At the senior level, English is still in a long-term substitute situation. It is being managed quite well, but we are continuing to actively look for a long-term solution to that, which might even include what some might call an adjunct position to teach 1 or 2 sections for us to take some of the load off of our long-term sub situation. Our 8th grade language arts position, our primary exceptional children's position, and our drama position that had been remaining vacant, we do have recommendations for each of those sections to pay for. As far as community engagement goes, our Spirit Nights do continue. So tonight, head on over to White Swan and Wilson Mills if you're interested in some barbecue or just really good food. It's really close by, and they're going to be running it until I think 8 o'clock tonight for the special where they'll give us a percentage of of the earnings. We recently were at Gothams Deli, Kobe, and we will be looking forward to Zaxby's is coming up next.
Is this gonna continue every?
So because this is Giving Month, we're doing it every Tuesday in October. From here moving forward, it'll be once a month. So we'll have one place that will go in November, one place for December, et cetera, et cetera. But since this was the Giving Month, we tried to stack several of them into every Tuesday this month. We will be attending the Clayton Harvest Festival that was officially rescheduled to November 3rd, so that'll be coming up for us in about a week and a half. We have staff, students, parents, teachers, all of that that'll be coming to help us man the booth. We picked up a few items that we can pass out to just continue to gain interest, and we're going to explore whether or not some of our students might want to bring some things that they've been developing just as demos of what you can do with these, with weather permitting. We don't want any of their projects to get destroyed. Our EC director, from a community engagement standpoint, is working to start making new connections with local support agencies and as well as service providers, just to expand our connections in the community, because right now we're very, very isolated and we're really heavily reliant on independent vendor contracts, and there can be some community services that will be available for our students that we haven't truly accessed yet. So we're working on that. As far as updated school policies go, we just want to remind all of our carpoolers, especially our drivers, to not be on their cell phones during carpool, either texting or talking. Those small distractions can add up to big safety risks for our students. We've had several near misses recently, and we've been asking our SRO to help us remind our drivers to not be on their phones during carpool. It's just, the more alert you can be, the safer our students are. As far as current school happenings, as we mentioned, October is Giving Month. We have added our first couple of puzzle pieces to the sign, and then the wind blew it down, so we won't get back up. But we are well on our way to close to $10,000 in this first. We ambitiously wanted to try to get $100,000 this month, but every day I'm regularly getting donations. So we are seeing more. Mr. Dunn, you correct me, with the PayPal situation, we're seeing more that are doing the continuous donation, so that way they're giving a monthly contribution, which is really nice. It helps them to give a bigger gift and not have such a burden on a one-time donation. And you're starting to see more and more of the pop sockets around and more of the magnets on the cars, because those are that sort of badge of honor that you have given. So I'm no longer the only person with the pop socket. That was my claim to fame for a while. That was only because I knew where they were. As far as our capital campaign goes, know that while October is our Giving Month, and this has really been our target, it doesn't close. People are more than welcome to continue contributing throughout the year, and we will continue to recognize our donors throughout the year. Report cards go out this week, so on Friday, students should be carrying those home. So parents, community members, look for those in backpacks. As well as Power School will be updated at that point, so you're welcome to check it out online as well. But the official in the middle type report card will be coming home in their backpacks in that lovely yellow envelope that we've all come to know and love. Pictures everywhere. We've had senior pictures, we've had team pictures. We're getting ready to do retake pictures in November, so if you see lots of cameras on campus, it's just celebrating and recognizing all of our students and our teams. We do want to invite everyone to join us for our next roundtable, which will be November 1st. It was originally scheduled for this week, but we've had some conflicts, so we're going to move it to November 1st. We will have plenty of candy, because it'll be the day after Halloween. And that'll be our second roundtable. The topic will be intermediate curriculum. So again, we just encourage as many as can to come join us. We find that they're really intimate conversations. Those of you who have attended, it's even a little bit dark, because it's in this room about this time of the evening. We have really open-ended conversations. We start off with a little bit of a primer just to make sure everybody's vocabulary is about the same, and then we say, what is it that you'd like to know about? What would you like to talk about? What questions do you have? And or what ideas do you have? So we really try to keep it as open and participant-driven as possible. And then as far as that, the only thing I do have personal recommendations for closed session. And look to my academy teams. Does anybody have any other reports from your areas? I think Dr. Silver has a couple of reports for you related to PLUS and to subgroups. So first, we're going to direct you to your handouts. What we're going to try to do for you monthly with the PLUS updates is Dr. Silver is going to prepare for you sort of a one-pager to give you an update on what's happening right now. And then when we have some big movement and big information to share, we'll have a formal presentation. So for tonight, we just have that one-pager that says PLUS Leadership Team. I think it's towards the back of your packet. Looks like this. So that'll be your sort of one-pager. As we mentioned last month, we took a little bit of a turn and we're allowing the team to be a little bit more organic, and instead of focusing so much on the assessment plan, that really identified that core curriculum as an area where we need to focus. And I'll let Dr. Silver kind of fill in the details, but it's my understanding that they've chosen writing as our core focus because it supports all curricular areas, including our math, writing, and problem solving that our students are struggling with, as well as supporting really and being aligned to all of our core competencies that have been identified through the PLUS process. So I believe she's going to bring up an electronic version of it on the screen for those of you that are in the audience and maybe don't have a copy, and hit any highlights. And then really she's going to spend the most of her time talking about the subgroups. That was a question that came from the group last time about what do subgroups mean in the North Carolina report card system and how do we use information from those subgroups.
Good evening. To reiterate, we are so excited for the first edition of the PLUS Post, which is going to be the PLUS newsletter that launched today. So if you haven't already, please, it should have came to your email, click on the link and view all the awesome work that our PLUS initiative that we've completed. As Ms. Williams stated earlier, just a reminder, at the last board meeting we shared that our team had been working away and had identified the need to focus more strongly on our core curriculum. So they decided to move slightly away for a little while from the assessment focus and gear towards strengthening the core. And the area that they identified from their SWOT analysis was writing. And one of the reasons that we reached writing was because in our workspace, we have all of the core competencies posted on the wall. And one of the things that our team noticed is that writing is a major component of each one of those core competencies. So that's why they decided to focus on the writing. And also the writing addresses one of our most difficult areas to grow in concerning math, which is our word problems. So we figured that writing would be the best focus, and writing crosses all curriculums. So that's our rationale for moving forward. What can you expect to see? As of right now, we are in the process, and they actually presented their first drafts today of their writing rubrics to be used in each academy for the various styles of writing identified in North Carolina Center Course of Study. So the idea is that we will start churning away and editing those writing rubrics, and they will eventually grow into being the writing assessment for the core competency to be used by all of our teachers. Any questions related to PLUS?
I have one.
Okay.
I was looking here at the writing, school-wide common writing process. That's good. But is there any thought as far as with that writing process and organization of, this is real basic, handwriting, because there's so much of this stuff, and organizing when you're doing the math problems and actually organizing numbers as part of, I see that as part of writing. Am I on target there?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me. That is actually already being woven into the classes already, and that is exactly what we're talking about, the process that you go through when writing.
So walk us through what your thought is a school-wide common writing process.
Dr. Schwartzlander, you want to chime in?
Sure.
And you can
Dr.
repeat.
Schwartzlander also is an admin on it and has been leading some of this portion of the conversation. Ms. Dixon, can you repeat what your question was?
I said, can you walk us through what your description is of a school-wide common writing process?
I think what we are intending to do, the first step is the PLUS committee of teachers. We are working on becoming expert writers ourselves and determining what that process is going to look like here at News. It could look like a variety of different writing processes. We could do writer's workshop, we could do author's craft, we could do many things. But what we're focusing on right now is making sure that our teachers are proficient instructors of writing. We have several tools on campus, but we have to teach our kids how to use those tools. So after our teachers are able to determine how our kids should be learning how to write here. We are going to create a plan to teach our staff how to teach writing. So one of the very basic first steps is we're talking about the writing process. Like going through the writing process is a step that right now we are not implementing with fidelity across the campus. So we're going through that process. We're looking at the fact that good writers look at excellent writing and model after that. So we're picking apart mentor texts. That's going to be part of our writing process, is where teachers understand that we look at a strong piece of writing, pick through it, and allow our kids to model their writing after strong and excellent writers. Then we're going to go through a draft process. We're going to publish and have student voice be able to be heard outside of this campus and give our kids an audience for their writing. So it really is the writing process and using mentor text to guide our students' writing. I don't think I answered your question.
No, but that's okay.
But like, I want to be as clear as possible, so how can I clarify?
Well, that sounds like a lot to do, especially if you're telling me you have to teach teachers how to teach writing. When you say school-wide, that means a lot of things should be uniform, so I wasn't hearing what will be standard in, you know.
And I think that that's where also the teacher-created rubrics are going to come in. So whenever our teachers become comfortable and competent instructors of writing and develop those rubrics, those standards for our students, that's where we're going to have the uniform processes. These are the areas that we're going to look for in our students' writings here at News. And this is what proficient looks like, and this is what accomplished looks like, and this is what it looks like when you need some help. We all know that there are a multitude of resources out there, and we are not trying to reinvent the wheel. But what we are trying to do is take a handful of very invested teachers and train them to become teachers of writing in all content areas. That's got to be our first step. Before we can even, I know our goal is to have a uniform school writing process, and that will happen. This year we're focusing on our teachers to make sure that they can come out here and teach our staff how to instruct in writing.
So one question, I know we're getting to the point where we're making sure everyone's on the same page as far as structure, performance and that type of thing. I don't want to leave out the performers that are, I'll say, as we talked about last time in our charter, where we look at the high end also. Okay, so my question would be, how are we know who those are, I'm assuming, in the classroom areas, right? We know who the high performers are. And we know, I'm not saying everybody's not a high performer, I'm just saying you know who those are that are in the top, whatever. So how are we addressing that to make sure, from a competency standpoint, when they walk away from this charter this year, next year, the next year, that they are ready? Because from a community aspect, not from News, but from some of the other schools, I have personal contacts as far as nephews and nieces at another local high school, and when they went to their college, they said, we were not prepared. We do not want to allow that here in News. So.
Agreed.
I don't guess there's an answer, but I just want to make sure that we have folks, right?
Right, and we have talked about that, you know, pushing our students who are excelling in writing and communicating to go through writing competitions, local, national, and having their writing assessed and judged by somebody who is more objective than we to give them that feedback to grow. Right, but we're also focusing on types of writing that are more technical this year than a narrative. We can all write a narrative. We could sit down and write our story, but what we as a Plus team have decided to focus on is informational, explanatory, or argumentative and persuasive text. Those are the basis of most college essays. You need to be able to explain and inform in your college essay, and if we have a strong structure in place that is going to guide students to writing a strong informational or explanatory piece of writing, they're going to be that much stronger in their college application. applications.
Follow-up question on the plan. What's the schedule for this, as far as the processes of the teachers and getting to certain, what are the?
Overall, we have not drilled down to the point where we have a detailed timeline. That is one of the things that we're currently in the process of working on. But we have planned for the second semester to be devoted to this team feeling strong enough to where they can go out and start delivering PD, professional development in the area of writing, to our other teacher corps. But that's as far as we have gotten. I can't give you a drill down schedule right now because we're actually in the process of still working that out.
But from a big picture, the idea would be that everybody would be trained either before the
Spring
summer or
semester.
through the summer, so that by the time we all start back with the new school year in August,
Right.
everyone has the same baseline understanding of
Tell
how we're
us
teaching
what
writing.
kind of training you're talking about for educators. What kind of writing training are you talking about giving them? I mean, what are the deficiencies that you see in teachers who can't teach writing?
I can describe what I overheard even just today in their practice model was that as we come up with a common assessment rubric, sitting down with an existing text and as trying to use that rubric to assess it so that we at least are all assessing writing in the same way. Because if we're not assessing writing in the same way, we certainly aren't teaching our students to write in the same way. So starting there, but then it sounds like once you start the actual process of this is how we're going to teach writing, we'll have 1 or 2 or 3 different ways that we're helping teachers who teach outside of the content of English language arts in particular. And an interesting point, I don't think anybody on the team is a language arts teacher. I mean, other than yourself. I mean, the teachers themselves are all from other disciplines and agree that the writing is not strong in their area and that they need help in helping their students learn how to write or do better writing.
What does
And-
writing?
But the history teacher doesn't have to teach English. I mean,
But
They need
I'm
to
sorry.
support what's being taught in the language arts classes so that they can make sure that the students are making the connections and using the same skills from their language arts classes in their content areas. I've been in this place as a biology teacher where no one ever thought to tell me how to teach writing, and I'm grading lab reports based on whatever I made up myself. So I took the initiative to go to the language arts teacher of my students and say, teach me what your writing process is, so I can mimic that as best as possible in my class so that I can make sure I'm reinforcing what you're teaching. Otherwise, I may actually be breaking down what you're teaching your students in the writing process, and I was. And inadvertently, I was allowing fragments, or I was allowing improper spelling or improper grammar because I was only worried about whether or not they were just explaining to me what they were thinking. So it's small
grading
things like
against
that.
grammar is, that's what I'm wondering, what are you going to teach them to do? Because I don't think you need to turn them into an English instructor.
Oh, no.
But you can grade a lab report on I'm just thinking that a biology teacher could grade on spelling and.
Oh, certainly, but in terms of having deep knowledge or even just some shallow knowledge of what are some prompts I can give them to engage a little bit more in their dialogue instead of because of this I did this. I might not have had a big vocabulary of sentence starters or anchor charts that I could have in my classroom that would say, here are ways to sort of frame your thoughts. If I can at least start to learn how they're framing that writing process in their other class, I can remind them to use that same strategy in my classroom. And that's just a shallow piece, but I'm sure you're thinking of other things because I did hear some very different types of conversations there.
Many of the members of the PLUS committee are science, social studies combined teachers. So when you're bringing in the aspect of historical analysis, photo analysis, there's a way that you want to be able to write that is like a literary analysis, but it is more based in nonfiction. That's not something necessarily that our language arts teachers are going to teach them. We all have to teach writing that is content specific, because as our kids begin to go into college and post-secondary, they are writing content specific pieces of writing. They're not just doing a general research paper. They're going to focus on an MLA standard in a humanities class and an APA standard in something that's more based in research. That has to be taught throughout our campus, and if our teachers are not speaking similar language and having same expectations for writing, then that's where we're going to fall down. So being able to have a math teacher, when you walk into math class, like your jaw should not drop on the floor if you were asked to write in math. Writing in math class is part of math class. It's one of the mathematical practices. It shows your critical thinking, it shows your creative problem solving, and it shows your perseverance. We follow those mathematical processes just as much as we do the Common Core. So having students understand that as you travel throughout this campus, you are expected to be able to effectively communicate with a wide range and variety of audiences in content-specific vernacular and format is essential for our kids. I don't want them all to teach Flowers for Algernon and taking a look at, allusion in literature, but I do want them to understand how to write in a very content-specific way.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's arguing that. I think there is some question in terms, from my point of view, the amount of time that you may be spending doing PD on people who don't need to turn into English teachers, because that's not their discipline. That's all I'm saying. So you're describing having to turn your team into writing experts, is what you said, and then they would then go off, I'm assuming, to train the rest of the crew. And so that's just time consuming, I think, for a person when you really get down to it. Most of the time it's about grammar and spelling and fragments and mechanics that I think, most instructors across the board could just manage those elements in their class. I think things I just feel like it would get a little muddled if you're trying to have a history teacher turn into an English teacher to grade their history.
So let's do this at our next meeting with the board. We'll have a better update on the types of training that we're talking about so that you can see how deep or not deep it's going. Or
Yeah, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
And we also did pull out the writing standards for all contents. So all contents have writing standards, and that was the basis of the beginning of our discussion. The fact that there is writing there's historical writing, scientific, technical writing, so we did pull those out and look at them when we were starting this whole discussion.
So they're already in there. What are the teachers doing now?
That's what we're determining.
But they've been in there a while.
That's correct.
Yes, so,
and we want to make sure that our teachers have the confidence to implement all of their skills. And if they don't, then we want to fill that bucket.
I think a lot of the comments come from also the fact that teaching writing and talking about teaching writing is very complicated. It's very hard. So, okay, I'm going to teach you how to write. That is not an easy task, particularly across curriculums. So to me, I know it seems like it's going to take a long time, but I want, as Robbie said, I want children who are proficient in writing across all curriculums and across all grade levels. And if I want them to write no matter what what class they're in, I want a beginning, middle, and end. And I want an introduction and conclusion. And if, to me, put a little time into the beginning, so we do have some rubrics. But you said you already have sample rubrics, correct?
We're building, they were being built.
You're building those. And so how long do you think it will take you to get a hard and fast rubric for every academy?
They just presented their first draft of a writing rubric for informational text and for persuasive text today. So today was their very first stab at it and their very first critique today.
January.
Yeah.
And so what I'm understanding here, bear with me, is that it's not that we have a problem in the English and the literature classes as far as writing, it's that we're trying to sharpen writing skills in math and social studies and places where we've been focusing on the content of the class, but at the same time realizing expressing that through your writing is very important too. So somebody that responds to something in social studies, they're going to be told how to make that argument and state it accordingly. You did, well, that's.
I mean, I didn't hear, was it a problem in English? I mean, I would imagine that's the only reason.
Is there a problem in English?
ELA.
So I just want to mention, as a student, I've taken advanced placement classes in almost all of our different core curriculums, and I definitely use writing in every aspect. I used writing in my social studies, my English, my science, and my math, and most of my writing skills came from a baseline English language arts foundation. And I think if we did focus in different core subjects, and if we did have a writing rubric and a science rubric and a math rubric, it would definitely help with these advanced placement classes, because most of my responses in these other core classes came from an English background as opposed to a math background. And these teachers do base their rubrics off of College Board standards, but by having a school-wide rubric that has a foundation and will prepare you for college, I think would help you more on AP exams, as well as in the future, beyond high school and AP, into college and undergraduate degrees.
Thank you, Ms. LePage. And on the, have you taken an AP exam?
Yes,
so
I've
far?
taken
In a non-language arts class?
Yes, I've taken.
And like have you taken AP biology or?
I took statistics, environmental science, language and composition, history.
And so statistics, a large portion of that is writing, correct?
A lot of it is.
Thank you.
So then if you'll pulling it up, turn to the slide presentations, just, there was a question last month about performance, the school report card, and we use a term called subgroups, and there was a question about what are those, and we probably should know a little bit more about those, so this is just a nice high-level overview to help you understand what subgroups are and what we as a school do, the information that comes out of that type of data aggregation, or disaggregation, excuse me.
So I want to start off by defining student subgroup. What does that mean? So a student subgroup is any group of students who share similar characteristics. And when we say similar characteristics, we mean it could be gender identification, racial or ethnic identification, socioeconomic status, physical or learning disabilities, language abilities, or it can be school assigned classifications. When we say school assigned classifications, that could be special education students as an example of that. And this is a definition that we borrowed from Great Schools Partnership, which is a partner of the whole ESSA policy that our state now has adopted, Every Student Succeeds Act. So when we drill down, subgroup grades, and I'm speaking in reference to our school performance grade and our report card. So subgroup grades at the school level are calculated and reported for each subgroup within a school that has enough data to make a computation. Now, what do we mean by has enough data? For example, at least one indicator with 30 data points or 30 student scores. That would allow us to have data for that particular subgroup. If we do not have that amount of student scores available to go in there, we will not receive a grade or a score for that particular subgroup. Does everybody understand that? So when we go to the next slide, you won't see a score or a grade for every subgroup, and that's why.
And just to officially clarify, that doesn't mean that we don't have students that are in these subgroups. We just don't have enough scores within that subgroup to be statistically significant in the report.
Okay. All right. So moving along, if you notice to the right, you'll see our school-wide.
So on your subgroup achievement scores page, it's always good on the slides to put labels for the values, so those numbers in parentheses, is that proficiency in those subgroups?
That's your achievement score for that particular subgroup.
Do you have the number of kids in each subgroup to give, because the idea is you always have to look at the representation from a number to the overall population. So, like, for example, let's just take an example. If somebody says there's a 30% proficiency in a category, and it's, 5 kids, that's an issue, but it's not the same magnitude of an issue if it's 30% proficiency in a subgroup and that's 80% of the student population. So I was just trying to ascertain from this what is the percentage of the students from the subgroups to the overall population.
We didn't include the total number, but that's not a problem. I can email it out to you as a follow-up item. So moving forward, we've listed all of the subgroups. You'll notice that for American Indian, Asian, and English learners, there's no score provided because we didn't have enough student scores to generate a score. So the subgroups that are shaded blue, we did have enough students to generate scores for those, and that will be our Black, Hispanic, multiracial, which means 2 or more races, white, economically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities. And I have their student achievement score in parentheses beside it. And to the right, I've got our school-wide achievement score.
And if I may, because this was intended to be an overview, just a general description, it can get really thick. You can do male versus female, then you can do male within each subgroup, female within each subgroup. So these spreadsheets can get really, really massive, and that's what we do look at them, and we do try to really figure out where are the disparities. But because this wasn't an overview, it was not intended to be a deep dive. So we, at the pleasure of the board, will provide other
I think
analysis.
it's just more about organization
Right.
of the high level provided that was our.
And just in general, what are students with disabilities? How, is that our EC population?
Your EC population.
So is that, just so I'm clear from an understanding perspective, is there's the medical disabilities, right? I mean,
It would be something that's listed as an IEP. So if a student has an individualized education plan, they're considered a student with disability. If it's a student with, let's say, a 504 plan, if you're familiar with that, they would not be.
oh, okay. Yeah, because sometimes the words are used interchangeably.
And they're not. They are
Very
very
different,
different.
very different.
But, so a child that has a specific IEP is actually categorized as a.
Correct. Because they generally have a diagnosed student learning disability of some sort. If it's a medical need, I'll be very superficial. I broke my arm and it's my riding arm and I need some accommodations for the next little while so that I can figure out how to accomplish my work. Those students would not be here because that's not a permanent disability, it's a temporary 504 situation.
And that's what 504 means, I'm sorry.
It's temporary.
It's temporary.
It's really temporary, or it just means it's something about a physical need that it's not a learning disability.
Okay.
Maybe I have cerebral palsy and I can't hold my hand steady, so I need special equipment, but my brain and my learning patterns are all fine.
So let's start with the good news. So the good news is that our school did not receive an ESSA designation. So what that means is, if you can remember back to the last board meeting, we shared that with the ESSA legislation, that there were 2 new school designations in addition to the low performing that our state had. So the 2 federal designations were comprehensive support and improvement and targeted support and improvement. And our school did not receive any of those designations. So that is a celebration. The other celebration is our school was not placed on the NCBPI watch list. And what the watch list means typically is that although you may not be a comprehensive support and improvement school or a targeted support and improvement school, you're one snap away from becoming one. So we were not on that watch list. So that's the good news. The concerning news is the largest proficiency gaps. If you can remember several years ago, it was a big buzzword in our state, closing the achievement gap. You probably heard it a lot years ago. So this is what we're kind of talking about now, closing those large proficiency gaps. And the large proficiency gaps that we see, which is not that uncommon across schools in our region, is students with disabilities. The gap between our highest achieving group, which would be our white students, between our white students and our students with disabilities group, there is a 45.9 gap. The gap between our white subgroup, And our economically disadvantaged group, there is a 26.4 point gap. And between our minorities, they're pretty much leveling close to the same. With our Black students, there's a 26.4 point gap, and with our Hispanic students, there's a 23.5 point gap.
And again, just a clarifying comment, if you'll look at your subgroup achievement score sheet, the economically disadvantaged English learners and students with disabilities can also be in those ethnic or racial breakdown groups that you see there. So it's quite possible that there's students with disabilities that are white, or economically disadvantaged students that are white, or Black students that are students with disabilities, or Hispanic students that are English language learners, whatever it is. So it's not clean what we're sharing with you tonight in terms of how you might use all these data points, but again, an overview of how a school can start to use this information to make some plans for their teams.
And how does this compare with state national averages? Are we mirroring those, or is?
Across the state, you see large achievement gaps with your minority students, your socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and your EC population. So that is that's running with the trend that we're seeing across the state.
It's a problem everybody is
It's a
trying to
problem for
fix.
everybody.
But in general, are we?
Are we above the trend or below the trend?
I can provide it for you at a later date. So what are we doing? Now that we have this data, what are we doing? The first thing that we did was we paid attention to the largest gap, which was our EC population. So we decided to restructure the focus of our new EC director. So one being aligning the learning goals for those students with disabilities. And what this means is for our general education teachers, making sure that they know the learning goals and the special needs of their EC students. The second thing that we're doing in that area is we're going to start providing frequent EC classroom walkthroughs by the EC director so that he can really drill down to those skill sets and those learning environmental and physical environment items that you should see in an EC classroom. And monitoring the processes for compliance. And what that means is we're going to be doing frequent monitoring of the EC folders, making sure that those goals are listed in there. They align, making sure that we're having those meetings as frequently as we should be having them. Just paying more closely attention to those items and providing detailed feedback. The next item that we're paying attention to is
Can I
providing.
just ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Are you doing those strategies because you've assessed that's where the problem is?
Mm-hmm.
And where are you getting that assessment from?
We're getting that assessment from several areas. One being their observations. Their observations that are done in NESES. One being the general walkthroughs that our EC director has already done, from where he's just popped in classrooms and sat there and observed and took notes and brought it back. 3 being what our teachers tell us, our general ed teachers. Our general ed teachers, they have provided us with detailed feedback on what they would like to see from their EC teachers and what is missing or what do they need more of from them.
So if one of your assessments is that you've already observed non-compliance, I'm assuming, and so your strategy is to just up the number of observations?
And educate them and provide detailed feedback. And our EC director, after he does these classroom walkthroughs, he'll be giving them detailed feedback, and he'll do like a post-conference with them to have that feedback, and he'll also be doing modeling with them as well. So if he sees fit, he may decide, hey, I'm gonna come in and team teach with you today, or I'm gonna come in and model this particular skill to you today. And it may even be, hey, one teacher does this well, let's go visit this other teacher and observe them in the act and watch them do it, and then you can go back and do it as well. Targeted professional development. We've really gotten strategic with the professional development that we're providing, and each month this fall semester, we have focused on a particular subgroup or skill set needed to close this gap. For example, for the month of September, our focus was English learners, PD. And we know that we don't have enough English learners in that particular subgroup to generate a score, but that doesn't mean that English learners aren't contributing to the other subgroups. Does that make sense? So we still need to strengthen that group of learners. And in the process of the English learners PD, our teachers also honed in on differentiation skills, which cross over to that EC subgroup as well. That's a big part of educating that EC subgroup and personalizing their learning. For the month of October, our focus was digital teaching and learning. And what our teachers took away from that was more differentiation, which really crosses over into all three of those subgroups that we really need to close. For the month of November, our focus is going to be diversity PD. Teaching our teachers how to reach those minority subgroups, how to learn how to engage them in a learning environment, how to boost those connections and strengthen those relationships so that the students trust the teachers and care about what they're trying to teach them. For our final one, plus SIT and MTSS goals align to closing the achievement gap. We want all three of these teams to have the shared vision of closing these achievement gaps and pooling their resources together to come at this as a united front. And once again, the data that I just presented, it's being utilized by all three teams. And it's guiding the work of all three teams as well. So this is just one of the many data elements that the teams are going to be looking at to increase the achievement of the entire school.
And I'll interject. We talk about the term like closing the achievement gap, and so it sounds as if we might try to hold our high flyers at some bar while we continue to raise the others. Everything that we do is to accelerate everyone's learning. And so if we can accelerate and close the distance between the two groups, that's great, but that's not going to keep us from pushing any of our accelerated students from continuing forward and continuing to have higher achievement. And I think that message gets lost sometimes when people talk about subgroup numbers and closing the achievement gap, that it makes it sound all about like, well, we're going to forget about the kids that are kind of okay, and we're only going to focus all of our efforts on the kids that seem to be really struggling. It's a combined approach of hitting both sets of students or all of our students, but being mindful that there are certain strategies we're probably not using or we're not tapping into that can help some of our struggling learners advance even more quickly and catch up with their peers.
And this is not meant to put you on the spot here, so take this that way, but so to me, at this level, we're results oriented, right? I mean, that's our job as a governing board. And so when I look at this, I think it's great. I think you've identified some areas, there's data to back it up, there's some strategies being put in place based on your professional experience and your discussions, you think you're going to move the needle. I mean, what I'd like to see is that there's an aspect that says, there's one more slide in the deck that says, we believe that when we do this, when we come back in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, the numbers won't look this way. And we believe they'll look that way. Because without that, what happens is we go do stuff, we hope that things, and maybe it doesn't work, maybe we didn't pivot early enough, maybe we didn't make, maybe some of our thoughts wrong, and that's perfectly okay in the spirit of being improvement. But if you don't hold your standard that says these numbers are going to move, chances are they won't move, right? You get what you measure. So I just like to see.
I think that is the follow-on conversation, because this was initially intended to be, hey, what are subgroups and how does we use that information? So if this is out of curiosity, and we want to talk a little bit more about how we use that to set our goals for the school improvement team or with Plus and set those numeric goals and those targets, then that is the follow-on for the students and actually.
So in when this subgroup, as I understood it, these subgroups are defined in the North Carolina School Report Card grading system, right?
And it mirrors the legislation from every state.
So there are not any other categories in the employee?
Oh,
I mean,
there hey, this is an example of a nice clean set that you can look at pretty easily, but we certainly can, we can blow up your inbox with all kinds of stuff.
Well, I don't,
This is just scratch, this right here is just, I barely scratched the surface tonight. Like, this gets deep. It
The
gets
language,
really
the
deep.
language that we use in our PLCs and in our admin leadership teams is disaggregating the data so we can continue to
Yes.
pull these apart and apart and apart to try to get to the source. Because it could be that, to your point with statistics, the 30% could represent 70 that are doing well and 30 that aren't, and I really need to focus on the 30 that aren't, and the 70 that are good, I need to just keep doing what I've been doing. So that's what we start to do with these. This is top level, and you just start to literally shred apart.
let me maybe ask a different question, because this is just, I think this is so important that we have clarity of understanding around how we look at the data relating our student population, so that we set targets and goals, and we collectively say, we're going to go meet those goals. We understand it is, I haven't read the entire Every Student Succeeds. Yeah, but are there major categories in that of which you feel we have a significant part of our student population that fall within it that is not currently measured in the school report card grading system? So for example, in the school report card grading system today, the one we just got out, right, it was 72, which is great, we went up.
And the 70.8 is an element of that 72, right?
Right, within that, are there categories in the new Every Student Succeeds Act that are not accounted for in today's school report carding system? Because they're like two different entities, right?
Accounted for is probably a bit of a stretch. They're accounted for, it's just whether or not they're labeled clearly.
Okay.
But all data elements of all students, they're all factored in. But in terms of do they use the subgroups to say, well, if you're performing well with if you're closing your achievement gap, you get extra points? No, that's not how it's scored. It's overall, are you growing your students and are they performing?
Okay.
What you're speaking to is what we refer to as the business rules that ECDPI sets forth for us, and I'll be happy to forward you the business rules.
Well, what I'm trying to get at, I want to make sure.
We'll let you know how they're using
Yeah,
it.
I want to make sure that the ESSA is a federally mandated set of requirements, right? The North Carolina school report card is not. I'm trying to.
It's in response to the federal legislation, because part of the federal legislation is that each state has to come up with a way to rank and score their schools. So this is our response to that piece of the
Let's just
legislation.
take something. If we were 100% proficient as determined by the North Carolina school report card, would we meet all requirements in the ESSA?
Yes. Thank you.
That officially concludes my director's report, so I'm subject to any further questions.
Okay, we'll move into our committee reports. Finance.
A couple of things the finance committee did meeting. Before you actually have an updated budget that takes into account the actual finalized ADM numbers, as well as embedded in here is the actual addition of the athletic line item that we talked about before, the agreement between the booster club and the school as far as like their donation in and then what expenses would be paid out from the, from the school perspective, so that the school could actually help Booster Club because they had the internal controls and processes to take on some of that administrative work. So if you actually look at it, I mean, the net bottom line is we're still in the current budget showing a little over $180,000 in surplus. Again, that's based on the committed numbers that we have been projecting. And as you'll see, each month we go through the year, we always refine those line item numbers from projected versus actual to keep those numbers as close as we can to what we projected, which to me, that's probably the most impressive thing we've done on the finance side for the school in the last couple of years. That's allowed us to manage the finances so much better. So there's a couple of small changes line item for line item regarding some of the shifting numbers, but those are not really that relevant here because the macro picture is that we're still showing $180,000 surplus even with the updated ADM numbers. It's good. So we need to approve, have a motion to approve that updated budget for the
All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
Okay, one other item that let me make sure I get the terminology as he described it right. So in our fiscal policy, the way it's written is anything over $1,000 is classified as capital expenditures, which invokes a whole other set of like tracking processes and a bunch of other stuff. And basically, after discussion in the finance committee, our recommendation is that number's too low because, for example, you can go buy 3 whiteboards and that puts you over $1,000. So now you've got to do all these asset tracking systems when it's really just administrative overhead. Even it's from a spending controls perspective, it's not a concern because that already anything that's bought has to be approved by Susan with documentation tracking. So it's actually causing a bit of a budgetary tracking perspective headache when we set that number too low, quite frankly. So the recommendation for the finance committee is to set that, update the fiscal policy to go from $1,000 to $5,000. Anything over $5,000 will be considered capital expenditure, at which point you have to depreciate, you have to go over asset tracking, etc. And that's just to ease some administrative burden on the school from a day-to-day operational procedure around some of those purchases.
Supplies is $5,000.
We looked at the ones we had spent before and the ones that were causing an issue, like whiteboards and projectors and stuff. And if you look at those, we feel like actually they originally said 3,000. I said, look, it's not enough to cover 5,000, so we'll cover 80% off. And you'll still have maybe 10% here and there, 20% that are kind of fall above and really shouldn't, but we'll live with that. It's kind of an 80.
Do I have a second to the committee's recommendation?
Yeah, the committee second the recommendation.
Oh, is there a second? The second one. I'm taking my cues from Mr. Wood. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. So basically, in lay terms, this $1,000 limit was set so that people in the office couldn't spend more than $1,000 without board approval. Does that basically raise that to $5,000 that they can spend without board approval? Is that the way I understand it?
Actually, the current rule is that if it's over $2,000 and not already a budgeted item, that we have to have board approval. So this does not change that, it's just where it gets tracked in the budget. So anything that costs more than $2,000 and or is not already approved in the budget still has to come before the board for approval.
May I clarify something?
Yes.
Maybe to help you. Oh, sorry.
Amanda Heifel, our office manager, is coming to provide some clarifying points during my from.
When we're tracking our budget numbers, the main component of this particular proposal is when you've got anything that's over 1,000, it's kind of thrown over in the side pocket, so you're not getting an accurate list of different classifications within the budget. This is just allowing us to put it with the actual line item of technology or instructional equipment or facilities purchase so that you all have a more accurate chart of where the expenditures are going.
Because otherwise they get bundled under the capital expenditures after, as a policy said, if it's over 1,000, it has to go in the line. But really it should be under textbooks or supplies or technology or whatever. But to the point about being nobody can spend more with less approval. That's right.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
One other item that we talked about this before, so we actually have a recommendation from the finance committee. So as we have built up the reserves in the operating account, we've got, so in the operating account, it is currently today we have one main operating account for the finances with KS Bank. The balance on that currently is in the order of like $722,000. That is a combination of the excess we had from last year, as well as the money that we've got that is currently still in our account from the allotment that we currently receive from the state and our local funds. The issue with leaving that in one account like that is it looks like it's an inflated number from your current standing cash for this fiscal year. we don't have $722,000 from this current budget sitting in a bank account. And also, so we've always tightened the screws on how we manage it and look at stuff on a more granular basis. So what the Finance Committee is recommending is, and I've talked to KS Bank about the types of account order. Remember how we put the $50,000 in money market account? We can do the exact same thing as a contingency fund. And so the recommendation of the Finance Committee is to take $350,000, which is about a month and a half worth of salaries, if you put it in perspective. Our total payroll I approve every month is about $240,000 to pay payroll every month. So what we're recommending is take $350,000, create a separate contingency account for each charter. And all it is just another account where we just slide those cash reserves over. And so when we actually look at our monthly operating account on a monthly basis, it's closer to the dollars we have in the budget on a monthly basis. Because that money just sitting in there makes it look like, wow, okay, the budget says for this month we should be X dollars, and then you go look at the bank account, it's like $300,000 more. And then you start going back and questioning yourself, on all our budget numbers. And what the bank said they would do is they would set it up, just like remember we had the credit line from before, and we left that open. In the circumstance we need an emergency fund. This contingency would be called like NCS contingency fund. And it's just another bank account, and it would actually be draft protection against our main operating account. So if for some reason we need emergency funds, which I don't plan on that happening, but if it did, it would actually roll over into the contingency fund account. None of that money, it would still be an account that's audited. We would read out the balances every month, just like we're doing for all of the accounts now. It's simply to make the tracking of the current fiscal year money in that operating account closer to the actual budget that we see on a monthly basis. So we just need to approve, well, the Finance Committee approved it, but I'd like to see it officially approved at the board that we would actually create that account, move $350,000 over into that account, and it would serve as a contingency account. And it also helps us start to understand what is the cash reserves that we are doing better on a yearly basis to build up as we think about building funds, fundraising, etc.
So it's from operating, and are you gonna call it a contingency
Well,
account?
yeah, we propose just to call it NCS contingency. So we move $350,000 over into the account.
Do I have a motion in support of the committee's recommendation?
Is your motion due this yearly?
Well, no,
At the
once-
end of every fiscal year?
So actually, with this particular account, as long as you don't do more than 6 transactions every, I think, a month, she said, there's no fees and stuff, so we're not doing that. Probably what we'll do is probably right now, we'll look at doing it at the end of the year, is saying how much at the end of the year, how much would we sweep over into it, based on where we're at the end of the fiscal. We might consider it next year at the midpoint of the year, but most likely it's just going to be at the end of our fiscal, after school closes. We'll have a because we're closing our books for the fiscal year, we would look at it then and say, how much excess do we have, how much do we want to sweep over, how much would we leave to start out our school year.
So what would be the process if it's not the emergency or anything, but funding for something in particular?
I mean, it would have to come to the board like we spend money on anything.
No, but I mean, would that money be accessible for that?
I mean, all the money that we have in our operating account and in the capital campaign, as well as this, the contingency fund for the backside of the operating, nobody can spend that money without board approval.
And to clarify, if it's these cash reserves in particular, and you're actually trying to access the cash reserves, you would have to take a motion at the board to put them in as a revenue item on this year's budget. So if it's just a matter of cash flow, that's one thing, which is kind of what the line of credit helps us with. But if it's a matter of, I need more than my budget has, and I'm gonna use my contingency fund to make up the difference, HVAC units go, and we didn't have that in the budget, or we're ready to put a down payment down on a construction thing, that we would make sure that we bring to you an official motion to move money from that fund to this year's budget, or whichever year's budget, before you would expend it. That would keep you out of the problem of overspending.
Where did you get 350? Did we, I mean, is this account funded by surplus at the end of the fiscal year?
So that's,
You're flipping your own numbers really, if you don't just take exactly what the surplus is.
that's exactly the reason I propose we finally do this, is because now we've actually got a surplus built up so that we have an accurate picture financially of how much true cash reserves do you have. Because if you look at the cash flow in and out of that account, when you're paying out almost $250 million in salaries and benefits every month, that number swings a lot in a month.
And so do we receive our first allotment of the new fiscal year in time to make the first payroll of the fiscal year without the contingency?
Yes.
We get it in July, and we have a July 28th payout, so.
And so,
You were saying
no, you're right. Well, no, you're right, Jimmy. Actually, so historically, the year that, we got really close and we took out a credit line was because there was concern about cash flow crossing the fiscal at the time. We don't have that problem anymore. In fact, this is not, that 350 is not the full amount of the excess cash we had at that exit last year.
But it's funded completely out of overage.
Yes, and also, just so we all remember, is that you can't, what we do is we spend our federal and state dollars first for all of our budgetary line items, because you can hold the local dollars and spend them on whatever you want. You can't do that with state and federal. So this is basically, we had excess that we managed within our state and federal spending. We had excess from our locals, and we've been able to basically put it in the bank. And then one last point, just Susan, so we all remember.
Did you say excess state? There's no excess state.
No,
Just local.
Is that, remember before when we did the building and we had that whole auditing thing about, we had saved up money, but we didn't show it as revenue in the budget when we built the building, so it looked like we actually spent more than we have, when in reality we didn't. It was just an accounting fiasco. So what the point Susan's making here is, that money's in a contingency. If there's a proposal that comes to the board that says we're going to spend it, the good thing is this process will now say, wait a minute, you're going to spend it, it's going to exceed your available funds in your budget. You've got to go make an explicit call out that says you've got an insert of revenue line item in your budget and call out where those funds are coming from. Had we done that before, we would have avoided that, literally that paper issue on the account. Sorry for a long explanation, but I just want to be clear.
I've asked for a second in support of the committee's recommendation. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
If I may, there was a point you said, just because we are recorded and there's live minutes, when we get allotments from the state, we can't draw them down and put them in the bank account and just let them sit for days and days and days and days and days. There are specific rules. So when it gets drawn down, you'll see a big surge in the bank account, but it has to be spent within a certain number of hours, 48, 72, depending on what kind of funds it is. 72. So you won't see allotments just sitting there, which is part of why I said we never carry over state funds, because if we don't spend them, they get reverted.
Yeah, I think you can
Just
see
since
that when
it's
the
being
allotment,
recorded, I just want to make sure that was clear, that we don't hang over the state funds.
yeah, when the allotment's released, it doesn't mean it's sitting in our bank account. It's available to draw down, so once there's a request expenditure, then they can release it, send it down. Once it hits the bank account, it has to be spent.
Were you giving a facility subcommittee update? Oh, Robin.
So, so one other item there was we did get the proposals from Josh. He reached out and got proposals for the landscaping of the auxiliary gym, which we're required to do, and they gave us some grace period on that. But we need to get that done. We do have that. We carried it to the finance, or it was brought to the finance committee, and a recommendation to accept this proposal. True joy. And I'm ready to go. No.
Motion to accept the committee's recommendation.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. Resource?
They did meet this week, Chris couldn't be here tonight, and a couple of things that were discussed in there were the current status of the fundraising efforts. They do have the board out front. They filled in 2 of the categories, which basically means there's over $4,000 that's been raised. Currently, there is about $15,800 in the capital campaign account, which is some money we had from last year as well as what we found over here. They talked a good bit about the strategy of, fundraising at News Charter, and what they felt was they still need to have some improved procedures around coordination of fundraising. So what they're going to do is come together with a framework, working with Amanda as the on-site finance person and the fundraising proposals, and they're going to work with academy leaders for next month to just talk about how they do a better job of coordinating things, because there've been some issues with, they wanted to do one thing, they thought they had a plan, and something else popped up that somebody in the school proposed. So there's a little bit of coordination work that needs to be in there. So, it's good that they're talking and they want to collaborate with the school and the resource development committee. They don't have a proposal now, but I will tell you there was a lot of discussion at the meeting that the sense is that they feel like, as well as Chris too, that if we're going to be serious and we're going to be able to sustain resource development, we're going to have to look at getting some paid resources to help. It's just, we've just now learned that it's just more work than you can expect out of a volunteer person. And then there's also some administrative challenges. When you've got volunteers that need to interface from a coordination perspective with teachers, for teachers that do things, because they're the ones that front end the students and et cetera. So they did agree to start looking at some other educational people that are doing either foundations or they have paid resource development people, just to understand what that landscape will look like as they start to think now about next year. Because what you can't do is make a strategic decision like that. You can't bring a person in at the start of the school year and expect them to do a lot that school year. So this is really more thoughtful planning towards next year. No proposal, but that was the gist of the conversation.
And if I may, because I was away at a leadership conference at the time, there has actually been within the charter world a bit of a circling of how do you do this in job descriptions and different formats. So I'll get you all of that research to just sort of on our own organically do compiling so that they can go through that.
Thank you very much. Personnel?
Madam Chair, point of order, Personnel Committee has been eliminated.
And on the next agenda, I'll take that.
Thank you.
Just no need to ask for a report.
Academic Affairs Committee met earlier this month. It met on October 8th and went over updates regarding career and college promise, the plus updates, which we've already received, and AP scores, and one more thing. Audit, freshman and senior seminar discussion. So the CCP was the Career and College Promise, has been moving along, I believe, and in terms of personnel coming over and registering students and working with them and so forth. And so we still, I don't believe, have a meeting to discuss other opportunities to partner. So I believe the school is waiting for News Charter School to kind of finalize when they are interested in meeting on that. The AP exams was a discussion, which was kind of a follow-up discussion because we had already discussed it at an earlier meeting, but we did not have the actual scores presented in a way that the committee was looking for. So Ms. Bullion was able to provide the graph that you have in your packet, which shows AP proficiency at the various levels and a discussion of our AP program and kind of the shifts and changes that are happening. So do you want to elaborate on that?
What you have before you in graphic form, it was a single standalone. The top graph is AP proficiency. Historically, AP has talked about 3s, 4s, and 5s as what they consider proficient. You'll even look at as recently as their 2017 reports. That's how they cluster their sort of performance reporting. But we're hearing more and more from colleges and universities that they really prefer to see 4s and 5s on these if they're going to extend college credit to students who participate in the program. So we wanted to show you both breakdowns. The other thing I wanted to do that we haven't done in the past, and I added this in, I hope Ms. Dixon doesn't mind, the national numbers or the national percentages for performance on these exams. There are more AP or advanced placement exams and courses available than what you see here. These are just simply the ones we've taught over the last 2 years. So when you're looking at the graph on the top and on the bottom, the dark blue bar would represent new charter schools May 2017 performance. So that would have been calendar year 16-17. And then the the gray bar would represent our performance this past spring in the 2018 time period, of which Ms. LePage scored several of those scores in the past, I believe. If you look at the national numbers, then that gives you an idea not only what we're doing with our own selves year over year, but how we're doing nationally in those same areas. And I think that's a good litmus for us, because as much as we always like to be 100%, in this field, you're not supposed to be. The majority of students do not get 4s and 5s. It's because it's hard. It's very difficult. The exams are very, very demanding. They are a single sit exam. It's not like you bring a portfolio of work, with the exception of maybe I think some of the art courses. But for the most part, you clock in, you take your assessment, you do your polls, you do your writing, you turn it in, and you're done. And how you perform on that determines what your score is. It doesn't look at your class grades. It doesn't look at your performance throughout the year leading up to the exam. It is literally a one-shot deal. So it's hard. But what you'll see is that we noticed, for example, if you go to the far right of both graphs, psychology, in the 2017 school year, we underperformed the nation. We were not thinking that this program was serving our students the way we wanted it to be served, so we didn't offer it in 2018 so we could take some time to determine if it's even a good fit for our school or if we need to work on training, because we certainly don't want to put students in a course where they're not even at a good chance of getting a 3, 4, or 5, at least at the national average. Environmental science, one in from the right, we offer that one currently on an every other year opportunity. Right now it's holding around the national average in both areas for 3, 4s, and 5s, as well as 4 and 5s, so that's promising to us, and we just want to continue to cultivate that course and grow it so we can get above the national standard. If you look at biology, I think that's probably one of our best course offerings that we have. Our students are outperforming the nation each year in both the 3, 4, 5 and the 4, 5 category, meaning that we are holding our own and doing quite well there. So we want to continue to follow whatever prerequisites we're doing there and whatever instructional strategies. Statistics fell off for us between the 17 and 18 performances. We believe we know what happened there. In the 17 year, we made sure that the students were enrolled in the actual course in the spring semester, so that when they sat for the exam, they were still actively enrolled in their math class. In 18, we tried something where to allow for some scheduling flexibility to offer it as a fall semester class, as a single semester class, and then they had to voluntarily come for tutoring and things like that in the spring, and they weren't actively enrolled in the course. And we see what happens. We don't do that anymore. We've immediately reverted back and making sure that they're actively enrolled in the math course the semester of the exam.
Yeah, I've heard that from talking to a parent at another school. Like, that just blows my mind. I mean,
you try creatively to, right, exactly. So it's just not the best strategy. We have learned from our pilot, and we will not do it again. Calculus, AB, and BC is a bit of a conundrum for us because last year was the first time that we offered the BC course and the sat for the test ever. However, we also had students taking the AB, BC as a partnership. So AB was in the fall and BC was in the spring. What we're seeing, and we know 2 things that account for these scores, and we just need to keep digging to see if there's other things. One is that some of the students that signed up for the partnership class didn't stay for BC, so similar to our statistics students were not actively enrolled in their math class the semester that they were going to sit for the exam. And the other are that the BC students were focusing so much on that second half of what they were learning that they may have lost.
So it's what between AB and BC?
They're just 2 elements of calculus. So when I was in school, BC wasn't even offered, we just had calculus AB, but now they'll give you AB and then into the engineering versions of calculus, so it's not just your base calculus, it's a higher level calculus.
So it's AB always in the fall and BC's in the spring?
Right now, that's the way we're doing it. Last year was the first time we were offered the BC. We stopped at AB, because you have to have a certain group of students who can get through ABs aren't enough. Yes. So getting into BC is even more challenging. And did you sit for the BC exam? She's currently in AB. Okay.
If we do this semester block system where a student takes the entire course in the first semester, are we allowed to administer the exam at the end?
Unfortunately, because this is administered by College Board, they set the testing dates and they only set them once a year. They have not made 2 testing dates And I don't
Is it
foresee it.
enough of a problem for you to consider changing that system entirely and not doing semester-long courses in the fall?
Yes.
For that very reason, making things year-long?
It certainly is factoring into our long-term conversations about what schedule ultimately is right for our students so that they can receive the teaching that they need and the learning that they need. I think you've heard me go on record about this before, so I'm happy to say it here. The block schedule system initially was actually developed more from a credit recovery perspective to give students 8 credit earning opportunities to earn the 6 required credits for each grade level so that they always have an opportunity to re-enroll in the spring semester if they struggled in the fall, etc. As a school, I'm sure adopted it because of what our community was doing, but we are having lots and lots of conversations about what the right schedule is for our students, knowing that we are college prep or college readiness and that we're looking for excellence, that chunking together schedules sometimes is not the best, and the coordinating, of course, with our CCP partners has been challenging because of the time of the day the students need to be dismissed, so we've got to look at all of those factors together, and we started that conversation with our counseling department and our academy leaders, actually 5th through 12th, because we want to make sure that this is a conversation about prepping our students in 5th grade for what is coming down the line. So yes, I would guess that a proposal for something different will be coming here. As far as United States history goes, we have talked with our history department, and Mr. Smith can speak to this if we need to, but we've learned that there's an alignment issue. For the longest time, our school only ever had 2 social studies teachers. We finally grew and got a 3rd one about 2-3 years ago, and we're realizing that the alignment between the curriculum that leads just before the American history fell off. So we've got to make sure that if we're preparing students for American history at the AP level, that they need to be getting that right level in the civics and economics course that precedes it. As far as government and politics, it seems to be kind of hanging out with the national standards, so we want to push on that one if we want to continue offering it to try to get it to accelerate above the national standards. And then with English language composition, we're actually, again, very similarly holding okay, but again, we want to push and challenge to make sure our students are better than the national average.
What do the numbers on the y-axis represent?
The 0 to 80s and the percentage of students scoring that in whichever category. So nationally, it's on the order of 300,000 students or 500,000 students, depending on the exam that sits for them. For us, it can be as small as 7. So back to Rodney's point, some of these percentages could be because 2 out of 7 students got it, which isn't awful, but makes the percentage look really, really low. Or 1 out of 10. A lot of your 10% are 1 out of 10.
So one thing it would be good, we talked about writing as a proficiency, or it would be good for these kinds of things if they would be presented with a written story behind it, so that we could basically read it and comprehend it. So for example, is there a good story we would tell that is, or is like within the county link, or as an aggregate, our AP pass rate percentage is higher than, whatever school of choices are around us as an example, because I'm hoping that answer is yes, which is a good story to tell. It's just a recommendation. We'll do that thing, because otherwise people come out here and they don't know what they're talking about. And then also the data, I'll always ask this question because I know how much data the way it's presented in cinema picture is. What percentage of the students does this story represent? That is such an important point. Not that if it's 10 students, that's great, but we may say, if we're true to our mission, then why is it not 60% or 70% of our students?
Do we know what percentage of our students take AP 1 or more? A battery dies when you bring a computer. If I remember correctly, we were at the, I'll get to it in a immediate follow-up, because we have more and more students taking more and more courses. So that's a trend that's also potentially concerning here as well, where I have someone maybe like Tara who's ready, but maybe is taking 5 or 6 courses in one school year, or 3 or 4, or 2 or 3. So what we have seen over the years is that we have more and more students sitting for more and more exams. And that actually tends to bring their scores down overall, because the stress of taking all of those exams in the same week or 2-week period, it is hard to prepare for that many exams that are all being administered at one time. I know we were in the hundreds with test administrations, but I don't think that's the number of students I think is closer to 7. But again, that's
I'll give it to Maria as with the narrative as well.
And are you doing an assessment on your offerings for AP?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That was part of the conversation that our academic team started just last week, which was what courses are the best ones for our students to get where they're trying to go. There are some AP courses that they're nice, but they don't really have a lot of weight in admissions processes. They may be a good learning opportunity, or they may be a good one to offer to a student who's really going to accelerate as a 9th or 10th grader so that they can get a little bit of feet wet with the concept of how an AP course works. So that's the conversation we're having now, is which courses, for example, psychology, would we ever bring it back if we're not doing well with it and it's not helping our students get admitted, then maybe that one falls off. Or as we look to our partnerships where other courses can be taken that fulfill the same purpose and our students actually get just as much meaning out of maybe taking it directly with the college through a dual enrollment process, and then we don't worry about offering that one and offer others.
Well, I think looking really at what are the top AP courses that college admissions are looking at, so that when you're looking at 2 applications, you know, you have a bunch of courses, they're like, no one, you know, you're just teaching those AP maybe because somebody's interested in that, but that's not your core. So I would definitely say it's got to be chemistry, because that's almost,
and right now,
it almost always represented in
right now,
AP.
facilities don't allow us to offer it. So
Well, I would do that in place of environmental science, if you can.
Is there,
we're working on trying to figure out how to get the facilities upgraded.
but I mean, that's, I think that's.
I mean,
That's
to
a-
me,
No, we
you
agree
got extra
100%.
money.
Yes.
I mean, that's the kind of cycle I'm looking at, because that across the board with the movement towards STEM,
We agree.
just if you want to invest in like some facility thing that's going to make a difference to core academics, and then
Motion to take out of contingency fund?
no, I'm not making a motion for that. I'm just saying I think you see that quite a bit on other high schools as a standard AP course is chemistry.
So,
Please know the only thing is we don't have proper ventilation, which does support the course. So we are working on that.
That's what we think, so.
And that is actively in the works.
So is there a, just so I understand, that's what I promise probably, my last question is when I is when we talk about the preparation of these things, these students as they go through high school, what are the tests or whatever that they can take to assess that? Where are they, like, because I heard there was some assessment going on and there was like 15 students that were registered, and what was newspapers is what we don't pay, and if it's a class that we don't have to pay for, why are we not having more of our students sit to give them an explanation or an idea of where they stand in their academic progress, you know, towards like college readiness, so we don't wait until the 12th grade and just be like,
Oh, no, there's no way until 12th grade.
so.
I'll be firm in that.
Can you give us a picture of what we're doing in regards to assessing the students for college readiness?
Right.
Not 10th.
That's where we're trying to up our game. Right now, of course, we have the standard ACT, SAT. SAT is voluntary. Students choose whether or not they participate in that. So as a school, if we want to talk about investing in that and making it a required assessment that we pay for, that's something we have to budget for. If we think it's worth it, a lot of schools are switching to or accepting the ACT now, and they're not being as strict about making sure that they take the SAT. The PSAT is a national test that students can take. We do offer it at certain grade levels to make sure that students can qualify for the National American Scholarship, but it is a good indicator of how you'll perform on the SAT, so we make sure students all take that. The ACT is something that the state does support, so we make sure all of our students take the ACT.
So PSAT and ACT, we don't have to pay anything for?
No, we do. They're not, because the state doesn't pay for those. So for the PSAT, I think I paid $11 per student for a version that my students are going to sit in. One might be $15.
The PSAT 8-9 is $11.
Yeah.
And then the 10-11, it was just slightly
We're not
higher.
paying.
Right.
And
So if we want to,
things,
right.
that's,
It's not a lot, so if it's something that over time we want to say that that's where we should be investing dollars. We're going to be bringing new proposals along those lines over the next couple of months, separate from the actual plus initiatives that we're sequencing kind of stuff. Are these great things?
the plan.
Our students don't, but I don't know if others do. They don't pay for it anymore, so.
The plan and explore
Should
test.
be a reason our students will take it.
Correct, and it's not. I mean, any student who expresses interest, we make sure they can take it, but if we want to make that bold step and just say this is part of what we do, is we have some cost to that.
But
but we don't require them to. The ACT, we require them to sit for in their junior year, because it's, the state pays for it, and that way then we get all the data back on that, we can use that for college readiness. As far as AP goes, when they start taking the classes, that their performance there starts to give us an indication. There is, College Board has been ingenious in its business model and has developed a pre-AP series of courses, which is part of their business model, but there is something to be learned there about how you teach your entry-level classes, like your English ones and your biology, so that the students are well prepared. I was doing pre-AP before there was pre-AP, and then didn't have to pay any fees for it, you know what I mean? Like, they don't get special credit for it. Now, if there are universities that are starting to say they like to see that particular credit on a student's transcript, and that makes them more admissible, then that's a conversation. But yes, there are things that we're doing to make sure that the prerequisites, co-requisites, that what they're learning in the prerequisites and co-requisites are preparing them for any college class they
I
might
just think
take.
sometimes we probably need to encourage these students to participate in some of
Right,
these things.
and that's part of what you'll see here too, I think is probably worth noting, is that as you grow an AP program in a small school like ours, you're gonna start expanding it access-wise to students who in other school settings might not typically be offered the course, and so you might have some years where your performance falls off because you're trying to get students who would otherwise consider themselves to be an AP student to try the course out. But we've got to balance that with not selling them a false promise. We don't wanna be signing up a student who's really not academically prepared for the rigors of the course.
So, actually,
they don't even
I do
have a
have
shot.
some motion, because this was a law, I agree, so I can, this is actually a law I saw yesterday, today, it was interesting, it caught my eye, it's about in the subgroup categories of students, that there's a law now about, I've not read the law, but about how kids, disadvantaged kids or minority subgroupings are required to have access to accelerated classes and learning environment.
So much session of Bill 99 and the
I
math.
didn't see the law, it was just really come out, it caught my eye today about, it's that law that they found that statistically, students that were less privileged were.
Not being offered
That they were not being offered those accelerated classes.
As a side note, we've got the Office of Charter Schools, that law does not apply to charter schools. However, the premise behind it is still something that we actively engage in, which is we look at the student's performance, not their background, not their parents, not anything else about them. We look at their academic preparedness. In fact, Dr. Sportsland is working very hard to get our math placement criteria in place so that it's truly looking at objective information so that all students who should be placed are placed and students who shouldn't be placed aren't placed. We're having a little bit of that problem too for students because they're really nice.
Yeah,
And
just in
behave
terms of
really
the thought, I
well,
was like.
are placed in a class that they may not be academically prepared for, and so then they start to feel really frustrated because their self-esteem starts to go down when they're not prepared for the class. So we want to make sure we're using those objective criteria on all fronts.
Do they get a grade for this class on top of their test? Do they get a grade for this class on top of their test performance?
Yes, so when they take an AP course, they'll get whatever their classroom grades are, and that goes on their transcript, and then that's just as a course grade.
And so, what is the correlation between their grade and their test performance?
Janice or Brandon, do you have that with you? I know that our correlation is pretty high in some areas, but I'm not sure in all. The grade distribution as compared to the scores on the exams.
I don't have that with me right now,
Okay.
but I can get it for them.
Because we obviously noticed that we saw a discrepancy in our lower grades in the performance where class grades were not aligned with their ENG scores, and so that's allowed us to start looking at alignment there for grading practices.
Okay. And so then we did have a discussion on the freshman and senior seminar. Brian, do you want to give an update on that discussion?
So now is when I get to say, if you look at his shoes, he was dressed way differently earlier today. He actually had a tie on with that shirt, and he had swim trunks over his pants. I have my crazy legs. It's Mix It Up Day for Red Ribbon Week, and so some of us embrace that. So while I normally don't wear polka dots, but I am not averse to patterns, but usually not this many all at the same time.
We looked over at the freshman seminar and senior seminar to see how they were doing as far as, producing the students that we're looking for that are, going forward. We looked over at the syllabus, made some changes, going to make some changes and make sure that we upload those. As far as, since that time, we've had a good report from our senior seminar, visiting our freshman seminar and the benefits from that. They continue to be a benefit. Is there any specific question that you have?
No. Whatever you want to tell us.
And I do remember when you said updates to the syllabus, we talked a little bit about our frames for our syllabi to make sure that there's a sort of uniform
That's
template
correct.
so that parents and students can learn what to expect information-wise from each of their syllabus.
And once that's developed, we'll make sure that we implement that across the board.
Well,
You asked that question.
I did ask that, and I wonder who is responsible for oversight for curriculum.
And ultimately, it's a combination of the leader and Dr. Silver being the Dean of Academics and being the leader for the particular courses that are in their area, so it's a combined effort. I know that Dr. Silver led some strong efforts at the beginning of the summer to help us really revamp their curriculum and then turn it over to the teachers to really then hone it in and make it nooses, but there are still certain areas where.
We've done a few more days and that kind of thing of readings. I'm sure Ms. Terry can tell you about those. But we're continuing to be that we're getting into the classrooms as administrators and being a part of the class instead of just being the ones that's sitting back and waiting. So I think that's a big part.
I think what we are looking for, especially for an internally developed course, is really a very specific infrastructure that's uniform, vetted, and approved, and not just these are the topics, but a curriculum structure that then instructors can work within that makes it uniform. So that,
And while I can't say we're perfect, we made great strides this year. All teachers that are teaching freshman seminar and all teachers that are teaching senior seminar are working from the same framework, are co-planning and co-developing their units so that there is a common experience for students regardless of which classroom they're in.
That's correct.
I mean, it's personalized, of course, to the teaching style of their instructor, but we did make some really good strides this year.
So our course is presented. Do you all do that?
Say that again.
Or do you?
Most of our courses are continuing courses, so we haven't done that, but I think that's a big.
Do you present, like instructors present their course, like they have to present their learning outcomes, they have to talk about their assignments,
They
their
do
rubrics
that
are
in the initial.
reviewed?
They do that in the initial when they first start class. They just introduce them and tell what the expectations are for the students
To you?
to the class.
No, I'm saying are courses presented to you for approval?
In this particular one, we did have a meeting before the school's classes
But
started.
there's not a formal
We did
process
not
that we
that
have in place
process,
right now for that. We've sort of
Right.
inherited the courses that were already in existence and have been moving along as we look for continuous improvement. And that's a good strategy for us to explore as we talk with our teams about making sure everything's aligned.
But that was one of the conversations we had at the beginning of the year. to
And we
make
did
sure
talk-
we were aligned.
Right, and we did talk a little bit about in this particular case, particularly for the freshman seminar course, getting the entire, we talked about this in our meeting, getting the entire academy team of teachers together to say, hey, this is supposed to be prepping them for your classes. What are they still coming to not prepared to do so that we can make sure we're really emphasizing those skills in this first class.
Thank you. That was all we discussed in academic affairs. Board development?
Well, I can't speak for the whole committee, but I can try to give a little bit of an update. We're putting the finishing touches on our bylaws package to send to Office of Charter Schools for approval. One of the things I've just sort of discovered that we will need from you, Madam Chair, is a letter, sort of a cover letter describing our intentions as far as why we made the changes in the bylaws we had. I can send you a little bit of verbiage on that, and maybe even an example that I found too. And I also believe there is a form that may actually require the physical signatures of all the board members to go with it too. But those are the last minute kind of details. And our representative from Office of Charter Schools, we still have one? There's more charter schools
They've
now
gone
than
away
there used
from
to be.
regions and gone to
Gotcha.
content areas, but yes, I know who.
Okay.
Like there's
That's
one
all
for
I have
bylaws.
From that angle, I'm not sure what else the committee chair may have for me.
All right, any old business? Any old business?
Yes, ma'am. With regard regards to our discussion of the agenda last month, I don't see a place on the agenda this month for committees to report, for the executive committee to report, committees that aren't standing to report.
Right. We did discuss that, so,
Don't see us.
so we need an agenda item,
Committees that are not standing
other committee
still
reports.
need to be allowed to report.
Athletic oversight.
Okay.
Executive committee is not standing.
What would you like to call those, non-standing?
Ad hoc. Your bylaws refer to them as ad hoc.
Okay.
That's what I call it. So yeah, I was like, oh, is there an executive committee report that was said? So if you have one,
Executive is listed as executive committee in your bylaws, and then the others are all listed as ad hoc.
Yeah, because executive committee is not really an ad hoc.
But it's not a.
no, but it's also not a standing committee.
So we can just say executive committee, then you can say add-on committee. Make our agenda. Okay, any new business? Yes, new business.
I know that our November meeting is scheduled for after Thanksgiving, so I think it's in the clear, but your December meeting, usually around this time, we talk about if you wanted to move it or cancel it, so that there's plenty of time for anybody who might be coming to know that you might adjust your schedule. And in the future, like I say, we come up with a calendar that specifically describes when you're off meetings.
Especially for those two.
July, it's usually December and July, or December, June, that you take an alteration.
We would still have a meeting on the 27th of November, and so.
Because Thanksgiving is early this year, so Thanksgiving would actually be the week before.
What's the last day of school in December? Sorry.
You have to do something on Wednesdays.
It's 19.
Is it
19.
My students telling me it's the 18th.
Half days and 19.
The last full day is the 18th, and then we have a half day on the 19th, which we usually reserve for our holiday luncheon.
School's still in that day.
That's what I'm saying.
Because it's currently scheduled for December 25th.
I make a motion we
No,
cancel
thank you.
December.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
I voted yes.
I'm just voting now.
Okay, I will entertain a motion for closed session for personnel and administrative discussion. All in favor? I'm scared to